Let's do it.
All right, so just to say hello to everybody, welcome. This is our first 2025 meeting. Happy New Year. With the new year, we are starting with a new name. So this is the first water advisory group meeting with the city of Bend. We talked about that in December and adopting the new name since utilities department is now the water services group. So kind of a cleaner, simpler name. So welcome to the WAG. And in store today, we have a fun discussion, interactive discussion about drainage and development density, I should say, rather. So we're going to start with welcome and introductions. We do have a few new members or different representatives from organizations joining us today. So we'll do a little around the room so folks get to know faces and the expertise that's part of the group. And then we're going to have a little bit of background with Lori and Austin tagging this in together, a little bit of background on stormwater considerations. We did provide some information in the agenda packet that took us back to, amazingly, April of 2023 from a UPAG meeting, and then also even further back in time, the Stormwater Advisory Group. So trying to bring the knowledge and information discussion that has happened over time, a little bit of that into this conversation today. And then we're going to talk about types of development and stormwater tools and do some interactive activity with that piece of the agenda today. So it should be fun. It's all stormwater, all drainage and density. Our meeting in February is also going to be stormwater focused, and that's when we'll be able to come back to the stormwater master plan. So see Trista online with us today representing that team. And as I said, Lori and Austin in the room from the city are going to be our main speakers today. All right, so I'll just say this real quickly and then we can do maybe the around the room introductions, but the WAG is our new acronym. So from UPAG to WAG with 2025, but we are keeping a lot of the format and logistics that we had in 2024. So we'll keep meeting. This is an exception because of the holiday, but we'll keep meeting the first Wednesday monthly, 11 to 12:30 through the spring. Folks should have that on your calendar for the save the dates. The June meeting will be the in-person tour like we've done in past years. And then we're going to keep the hybrid format. So Teams or Boyd Acres location in the conference room, whatever works for your schedule that month. And our mission is still provide input to water services staff on programs and policies for stormwater management, water conservation, and other water system topics. So just a little background information since we've got a few new faces in the room, and that cues us up here. I'm going to start maybe online with some quick introductions. And again, we can make this brisk, but Ashlyn, I'll maybe put you on the spot first since you're a new face for our group. But if you want to just, share your name, kind of the interest, organization that you're representing, and I'll say welcome on behalf of the team to the group.
Yeah, my name is Ashlyn Gribsko. I am a land development project manager with Polish Homes. So I manage all projects in the Central Oregon region, most of them being in Bend. Yeah, I'm excited to join.
Right. And we've had other Polish representatives in the past, but it's nice to have developer perspective represented one more time. Shane.
Good morning. My name is Shane Cochran. I'm the senior geologist with the Walls Group, a environmental geotech engineering and special inspections consulting firm.
Krista.
Hi, I'm Kristen. Sorry, I'm online today. I have pneumonia. Yeah, that's been fun. But I'm on the up and up now, so I'm grateful for that. Anyway, so I am the associate program manager in the Cities and Towns program at Central Oregon Land Watch.
And then Ramsey, welcome.
Hey there, my name is Ramsey Krebs. I'm a project engineer with the City of Bend on the stormwater team.
And Pablo, you've been joining us for a few times in and out here.
Yeah, hi everybody. Pablo Martos with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. I deal with municipal stormwater permits from the state level.
Brian?
Yep. Brian Wilkinson. I'm a principal civil engineer here with AKS Engineering in Bend.
Bronwyn?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bronwyn Mastro, landscape architect with Bend Park and Recreation District.
Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Buckley. Officially, I'm the representative from the city council's Environment and Climate Committee, but day job, I'm an economist with Echo Northwest. I'm a partner and I lead our natural resource work, mostly benefit cost analysis and some funding financing work involving water and land.
And Brooke, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Olson. I'm one of the city attorneys for the city of Bend.
All right. I think that caught everybody online. Trista, I introduced you. We can, a familiar face, she'll be back with us as a guest speaker next time around too, but the consultant lead for the Stormwater Master Plan development. And then in the room, Lori, I can only see you on the left there. I don't know if somebody's hiding in the corner.
Oh, we have all kinds of people hiding in the corner. So we'll see. Oh, there it is. Okay. Hi, everybody. Lori Faya, Environmental Resources Manager with the City of Bend. Let's hit Austin and then we'll go around.
Hi, I'm Austin Somnady, project engineer with the City of Bend.
Tom Medley, Senior Project Manager at Century West Engineering here in Bend.
There he is.
Rick Martinson, Winter Creek Restoration Nursery and High Desert Horticultural Center.
Seamus Kilcoyne with Mountain Sky Landscaping, the landscape construction manager.
Ashley Chamberlain, also with Mountain Sky Landscaping. I am the irrigation service department manager.
And oddly, only one of our cameras is working, I think. So.
You guys probably disabled it.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, there we go. No, it's not showing. Okay, well, sorry about that. There's other people. Don't just look at me.
Oh, all right.
Here we are.
Anybody else that we missed in the room?
No, you got it.
Perfect. So it's good to see everybody's faces again. Happy 2025. Our traditional start here before we dig into the super fun content is to take a quick look back at takeaways from our last meeting. So we had our December meeting was an annual review. So we took time to do a bit of reflection on the conversations we'd had over the course of 2024, and also for the city team to share a bit of the work that how they're taking action on some of the things that they've heard or some of the plans in future. And then we also asked for the group's input on topics of greatest interest as we head into 2025. So this slide sums up. There was a lot of interest from the group in the FireWise, WaterWise coordination between those two programs, putting water conservation first, but also considering fire resilience. And then water conservation, the program and performance of the program, kind of the measurements and goal setting was also of keen interest to the group. And then we also had a lot of interest in stormwater standard updates. And, that included both having diverse stakeholder input into that process, considering new best practices, and then consistency and alignment of the language in those different standards. And I think Brian in particular provided some nice detailed code and standard update interest areas. Those are on the right side of the screen. We also are looking forward to some stormwater rate conversations, potentially fall of this year or beyond. And then the other area of interest that we had was stormwater and street tree right-of-way implementation. And there's potentially a new urban forester joining the city that we could bring into the conversation with this group at some point. So those are some of the interest areas. And of course, drainage and density is highlighted because that is the focus for today. So as always, if there's other things that come to mind that you'd like to spend more time on with this group, please let our team know. But with that, I'm going to turn the page and we can dive into our main topic.
Yay! You go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So this is going to be the Lori and Austin show, and then hopefully we'll have, particularly during Austin's part, I'm hoping for a pretty robust conversation, and Aubrey even is going to bring up that some folks may remember when we've used the Mural app before to help us with keeping notes on the discussion today. But drainage and density is a big topic. It's been talked about for years at the city in various ways. It continues to have a lot of interest because things are getting more dense and there's less place to put the stormwater. So what I wanted to do is also give context. Today we're going to focus on some first steps that will relate to the stormwater master plan, some things that are in the scope of work for the stormwater master plan that will help us move forward, I think, finally on this topic. And basically the scope includes, and Trista or Austin can kick me if I'm saying any of these things wrong, but there's basically in the scope to put together like a white paper or a tech memo that will, summarize the issues around drainage and density, summarize regulatory requirements, because some of the reasons why we're addressing this is because we have a permit deadline from DEQ in November of this year that is relevant. The kind of the topics it's going to focus on, there's 2 bullets there, but they kind of are in some ways the same topic. But thinking about drainage and density in terms of infill, like 1Z, 2Z lots that are developing and are struggling to handle the stormwater, and then kind of at a bigger scale, like drainage and density in terms of thinking citywide about when should stormwater just be handled on site, when are there options and opportunities that we should look at allowing it and having actual steps people can take to have some stormwater managed not on the individual lots, but more in an off-site context. And we need to define all those words. So today I'm going to go through a few slides just really quickly. That's kind of a background and recognition of discussions that have occurred before, that some of you, like Tom sitting next to me, has been very involved in discussions for years on this topic. Some of you are new to it, so I just want us to all be on the same page. And also acknowledge that there has been work before that we are going to use and build upon. And then Austin's going to lead a discussion about what are some of these options and what are people's concerns and issues and thoughts about tools we might need to better manage stormwater going forward. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So next slide. So I'm going to be referring to some slides. They were, if folks, I'm sure everybody opened up the attachment that Aubrey sent out 2 days ago and read it thoroughly. But okay, if not, these are some of the attachments, but you have, just so you know, you have that available because you have that email from Aubrey. So in March of 2023, so my goodness, almost 2 years ago, when this group was really gearing up, we did have a discussion about drainage and density and the fact that this was an issue and we were going to start talking about it. So I'm going to refer to a couple of these slides, and there's also some things from 2018 I'm going to bring up. But this slide basically shows the, gosh, it depends what screen you're looking at, what color of blue or teal it is, but kind of that middle column of bubbles is kind of how development occurs now in Bend. So right now, in general, we require that all stormwater is retained on site. It's not supposed to leave, anybody's lot. It's supposed to stay on site. I mean, we're requiring that. Whether or not that's 100% effective, I think maybe open to debate. The street and right-of-way systems are designed with separate public stormwater management systems to handle the runoff from that right-of-way. Plus, there's also a little bit of oversizing that occurs. It assumes that 20 feet on each side, like from the private property, also drains into the right-of-way, which is appropriate because you think about like driveways and the drainage coming down into the street. Typically, in most of the city, we're using dry wells for disposal of stormwater or some sort of surface infiltration facilities. There's a small part of the city that does drain by pipes to the river, but most of it is using what are called UICs. Single family lots quite often are just handling stormwater with surface retention because they don't want to build and register with DEQ individual dry wells. So supposedly those are gathering stormwater from the rooftops and other hard surfaces and just letting it sit and infiltrate on site. And then there are a few, but not many, examples in the city where at kind of a subdivision level, the stormwater has been allowed to be routed either into the right-of-way or down to like where a lot was used up to build like a pond to manage the stormwater. But we don't have very many of those. That's a very, if you're familiar with stormwater management on the west side of the mountains, that's what happens all over the place, but they also have less ability to infiltrate over there. So then we move over to the far right and that purple line of boxes, and I put stars by 3 of them because the ones with the stars are basically requirements of our permit from DEQ, what's called our MS4 permit. So it's allowing us to discharge stormwater, and we have to meet certain water quality regulatory requirements. So the things that are starred are that starting in November of this year, we have to make sure to be applying the standards for stormwater management from a water quality standpoint to all sites that are adding or replacing 5,000 square feet or more of impervious surface, of hard surface. And we largely have that 5,000 square foot trigger now, but it's for new impervious, and we do have some exceptions to it. So we'll have to adjust that. I mentioned the replacement of impervious surface, and then the other thing it requires is that we establish basically a hierarchy. So first, focusing on stormwater, if at all possible, should be managed and disposed of on site. And then if you can't do that, so you have to figure out, well, how do we define if you can't do that? Then you can create a hierarchy of options for managing that stormwater elsewhere. And that's really the types of things we want to talk about here. And then the other 2 boxes that are not starred, but that doesn't mean they're not important, is one, of course, is recognizing we have increased density all over the place. We're building differently. We're building on smaller lots. We're building a lot more multifamily, mixed-use type developments. So less pervious area for stormwater management. And also, as we've discussed in this group just a few months ago, we should be considering our design storms and whether those are changing, whether we're going to see changes in frequency and the amount of stormwater. And I just, for instance, right now we're seeing this on the erosion control side, is that, just the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of rain. We haven't seen much, there's a lot of snow, but it's up higher. And we're seeing a lot of erosion control impacts that we don't necessarily normally see from the increased rainfall versus snow. Okay, that was a lot, but just a little context of why we're here and what we need to do. Next slide. So this was also from the March UPAG meeting. It was just acknowledging that in 2017 to 22, there was a lot of discussion about the drainage and density and the complexity of this issue and how you manage stormwater in that context. There were technical work needs that were identified that, we need a lot more tools in the toolkit. We need to figure out things like how to offer developers more options on their sites, like whether that's from porous pavement or regional type facilities and that types of thing. So that we want to acknowledge that happened and that we have some materials from that, but none of that was really completed. And the next steps were we need to develop programmatic and standards and codes to, we need to figure out what our solution path is and then what are the standards and codes to support that. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. this was from that prior work. So this was dated from fall of 2018. I think it's kind of interesting. It says a lot on this slide, but what it's really acknowledging is that wherever you are in the city and whatever your situation is, there's a need to address the fact that we're creating more and more imperviousness and less opportunities for easy management of stormwater management. So whether you're in an area near a drinking water well, or whether you're in a steep area or an area with welded tuff and there's not as much infiltration through the geology, whether it's an area where we want to redevelop with much more density like the central core, whether it's draining to the river, or not any of those things. This just kind of repetitively says we need some more options for stormwater management for both infill and new development and redevelopment. So next slide. This was another one from back that period of time from 2018. And this was recognizing we need more tools in the toolkit that aren't just ideas, but are things that people can actually pick from a toolkit, design and implement, and we will permit them. So this is just the discussion of things that could be called low impact development measures, or sometimes they're called green infrastructure measures, but that there are a variety of potential tools to manage stormwater, and we need to be acknowledging and allowing those things. And next slide. These were the questions we asked UPAG in March of 2023, and it's very relevant to today's discussion, so I thought I'd throw this back in here. So we had set the stage with saying, given that there's a regulatory emphasis for on-site retention and for low-impact development or green infrastructure measures, given that there's both legislative and kind of just land use development emphasis on density, also given that from a practical standpoint, if stormwater is managed on teeny tiny ponds on like every single property, it's really hard to ensure long-term maintenance of those types of measures. I mean, I'll just say that from my many years of experience with stormwater on the west side. So we need to recognize that background and then ask ourselves, under what scenarios should off-site drainage be an option for development projects? And what do we mean by off-site drainage? So we're kind of going to be asking that same question again today, but now we're ready to let's get moving on this. And then there's just one more, two more slides, and then I'll hand it over. Oh, Pablo. Pablo's got his hand up.
Yes, hello. I just wanted to say, I think folks in the room, a number of you may be aware, we're in the process of renewing the Phase 2 general permit, which Bend is no longer under, as you know. But in the discussions with the permit registrant community under the Phase 2 general permit, we did have some conversations about what counts as offsite, what counts as on-site. And we kind of came to the conclusion, and this is going to be clarified in the permit evaluation report for the renewal. We're pretty close to releasing the permittee review draft, and after that, we take in their comments, we go out to public comment, respond to all those. Anyway, we are almost ready to start the process of getting the permit renewed. Drafting is about done, getting close to done. But the conversations we had were such that we determined that for regulatory purposes, if there's a regional stormwater facility that is meant to take in stormwater from a number of parcels that are all sort of planned or developed at the same time as this regional stormwater facility, or an existing regional facility is designed with extra capacity for specific other parcels that are going to be developed, that doesn't count as offsite. The description of offsite is primarily intended for the conversations about like offsite mitigation of stormwater that can't be kept on site or treated as it leaves the site. And that's a separate issue if you're going to have a like a water quality trading program within your jurisdiction. So just in case that's relevant to this discussion about on-site, regional stormwater facilities, as are going to be defined in the permit evaluation report, are totally to be encouraged. It's a great way to sort of consolidate stormwater controls and development, and it's a smarter growth process, I think.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Pablo. It is. I think there's a lot of confusion about what's off-site and what's on-site, and so I'm glad I haven't been able to participate in all of the phase 2 discussions, so I really appreciate you bringing that up. As you know, Elizabeth's on maternity leave, and I'm trying to do 2 jobs for a few months, so awesome. Yeah, so that'll go perfectly into our discussions with Austin about off-site and on-site. So basically saying that this gives us license to think about more variety of ways to handle stormwater in a more efficient way. And that's great. So people might be asking, like, what is a stormwater hierarchy? What the heck is that? And it's kind of important because that's one of the concepts in our permit language. And this is not meant to say this is the hierarchy. This is just something that came flying out of Lori's head a couple of years ago about like trying to explain one version of a hierarchy. And this one might even be frankly too complicated, but just to kind of show you the idea. So the idea is you start at number 1 and you say for the development, can you just handle it on site? Can you handle it within the property itself? Or it could be the subdivision itself, but we'll start with this one as like just on the parcels themselves. That would be number 1. And then if you can't do that, and we have to decide, well, how do we be the gatekeepers on that? How do we have somebody prove that they can't handle it on site? So we have to figure that out. Then, for instance, with like items 2 and 3 are 2 different versions of like, well, maybe you can handle part of the stormwater on site and just the bigger stuff flows off the site to some other management area. And those would probably be like private facilities. So like, let's say it's at a subdivision level and that like the HOA takes care of it or something like that. Or I'm going to put in air quotes, the HOA takes care of it, because sometimes HOAs are good about that and sometimes they're not. And then you could move down to number 4, which is all the stormwater managed at a subdivision level. So you don't have to, nothing on site, just immediately put it into a pipe or down the curb and gutter into some sort of subdivision level facility. There could be some discussion about whether that is a public or private facility in terms of maintenance responsibility. Right now, from the city standpoint, that would be a private facility. But there are a lot of jurisdictions that consider these public facilities just because there's a lot of examples of private facilities not being properly maintained. But of course, that all means money. And then number 5 is like, okay, this idea of combining, dogs and cats living together, combining public and private stormwater into a facility of some sort, either at the subdivision level or some other version of regional level, and it's a public facility because it's a mixture of this public and private stormwater runoff. So our questions for ourselves with the hierarchy, something like this: how do we allow people to move down the levels of the hierarchy? How do we make decisions? How do we fund things like publicly maintained facilities? Is that bumping up the monthly stormwater fee for everybody? Is that creating different rate classifications? Which gets, our utility billing people going, So anyways, that's just the idea of what a hierarchy is. So I have talked long enough. So what I'd like to do from here is that's just a bit of background to kind of get us all on the same page. And let's go to the next section and have Austin take over. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more picture. This is a picture from the Luderman development. Some of you went on a tour that included this. This is kind of in Southeast Bend. This is a subdivision level facility, just so you have a picture in your mind. This is where a lot was given over to being a facility to handle stormwater from the development. Now it can go to Austin.
Great. And hey, real quick, Aubrey, what's my time check? What's
You have another hour for the meeting. So I think we've got plenty of time for you to dig in deep here, and I can also bring up the whiteboard or leave it on slides for a bit. You let me know.
I think maybe we'll start with slides for right now, and then we'll get going. But I think, thank you very much, Lori, for the background. Like Lori said, really want to make this like big workshop discussion. And so as far as like all the master plan topics, we're seeing this one is really like probably more private development focused than a lot of the other topics. And with that being the case, my intent is really to be kind of more development community driven. And with that, I know, maybe bear with me here, we're going to fall back a little bit. I know we've had a lot of these conversations over the past year, and we kind of know there's this assumed need, but the goals walking away from today is to really hear from the development community and like specifically, what do you guys have challenges with? Is this something you're interested in?
Can we switch seats? I want people to be able to see you, Austin.
Sure. I can even just go sit over by Rick, so I'm more in the
You're good? Okay.
So yeah, I kind of want to just start with that first step of like, yeah, let's put down on record that yes, the development community is interested in this, because that support is really what's ultimately I'm going to use to try to drive this concept through. And then starting with that, we have kind of these overall focus questions, and I think maybe a good step is we'll read through them now and kind of get some preliminary feedback. But then the other goal for today is to really jump into definitions. So I think like what Pablo brought up is on-site, off-site, regional, subdivision. It's really nomenclature, right? So I think maybe that's the best thing to get us all on the same page. Let's define some terminology so that when we go through this conversation, that way we stay on the same page. And then there's really 3 strategies I kind of want to go into. And those strategies are kind of status quo on-site, the subdivision, and then right-of-way regional. And then with that, with those definitions, there's a lot of different kind of combinations that we put together. So my hope really walking away is to get some feedback kind of recorded about development community challenges, interest in this topic, finalizing some terminology to go with. Maybe there's some additional categories we want to look at, and then just a real rudimentary list of like what scenarios do we even want to start considering, and then maybe there's some we can just cross off from the get-go. But from there, I think we'll just go ahead and start with these focus questions. So kind of number 1 is concerns and challenges about drainage and density. Currently status quo is keep all your water on site. Like Lori mentioned, there's a few exceptions around town, but want to hear from you guys from the group. Is there challenges, concerns? Where do you run into this, this topic?
Austin, I can jump in here. We face this on every project, and it's a challenge. Obviously the overall trend is to go denser, right? And as you go denser, something has to give. We're finding it very difficult to find places, especially on individual residential lots, to manage stormwater. And so having a more localized subdivision level, either dispersed or pond system is an option that we want to have. I think flexibility is important because it's never a one-size-fits-all program, but the other thing is, I would argue that where we're requiring individual homeowners to maintain these systems, they're just simply not being maintained. I mean, I can tell you that they don't appear to be constructed right, sized right, and then they don't last very long either. I think that landscaping and stuff, and so while I think we're kidding ourselves to think that each lot owner in the city of Bend is effectively managing their runoff. And I think that you'd be better served to have a more organized system that's dealing with in specific locations. So density is really the driver here, right? And if we're going to do density, people, if they're going to buy a very small lot, they don't want the remainder of their lot to be a stormwater facility. They want to be able to have a small patch of backyard that they can, recreate in. They don't want it to be a stormwater facility. So that's probably the primary concern is density and drainage on lots.
And then, so does that play into like the lot coverage as far as like, what do they do, the floor area ratios or whatever that being? Is it simply like percentage of the lot, or is it topography, or?
It's all the above. I mean, topography is a big part of it too, right? You can't just put it anywhere, and so what you're going to start seeing too is, some of the places are like under driveways and the backyards, which are then buried systems, which probably are not being registered with DEQ at the time. I think another thing that you could probably add to this is it kind of depends on the end user. If you have a developer who is developing a subdivision, selling lots to individual home builders, they're probably not going to want to bear the cost of that on-site drainage system in their development, right? That's a cost to them. They're going to try to push that downstream to the home builder, individual home builders. Whereas if you have a developer who's developing that subdivision with the intent of building all or most of the homes on it, they're looking at that cost more holistically, right? They're going to want to look at the most cost-effective thing, and oftentimes that's a piped storm system to a more localized facility, whether it be a system of dry wells or a pond. So
cool, great, thanks, Brian. That's great feedback. Anybody else, specific challenges, even just seconding that you agree with that is helpful? Is that kind of what Brian expressed something?
Yeah, most certainly. I would second everything that he said. I mean, certainly everybody doesn't want to have half or a quarter of their lot, if it's a small lot, taken up by a stormwater drainage system. And I would second everything that he said.
Great. Specifically, like during the process, are there hurdles that come up? Like, is it during the review process that you're going back and forth rounds with review? Is it getting?
Wait a minute. Let's just make sure on the first bullet that we don't have more comments. Like there's a bunch of folks online.
Yeah.
Kristen's got her hand up.
Hi. Yeah, I think I would agree with what's been said thus far. I also think that, especially with larger developments and like master plans, it makes, I think, potentially more sense to have that, like the on-site definition include more regional facilities just for an efficiency standpoint. But as I think with the large master plan developments are very different from single lot developments within the city. And I think, sorry, while having all the stormwater retained on site does seem, like a challenge, especially for, single family homeowners or even like small, like middle housing developments. I still think that maintaining like some, permeability in terms of like lot coverage, as you were mentioning, floor area ratio, building footprints, just so that there is still some green space, still some permeability in the land, even if there's not necessarily a stormwater drainage system on site. So that can at least mitigate some of the potential runoff that would go into larger systems.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else on that one? Just general concerns and challenges.
This is Mark chiming in, not as a developer, and I'll say that similarly, I'm interested to hear what the developers say, but just from a sort of an efficiency perspective and seeing how as areas get more dense, land becomes more valuable, and there's more reason to try to locate these in the most cost-effective way, including some of the off-site grouping. I'm curious if developers see any obstacles or challenges in the rules right now to doing that. Like, is there an appetite for more coordination across parcels? And is there anything about the rule system that doesn't allow as much of that to happen? And I know, Laura, I've mentioned before, I've worked with Seattle Public Utilities on sort of their crediting and fee in lieu program and sort of the brokering efforts that they've had to try to, not get all the way necessarily to a trading system, but starting to incorporate some of those principles to overcome some of these on-site cost issues. So I'm curious if there are obstacles that are obvious from the developer perspective.
I can
That was
kind of
perfect because that led us to the second bullet.
Yeah.
I think for us as Polish, we're building in these large master plan communities. We're building every single home in those communities, hopefully. It would be really nice as we're kind of doing this infill development where we're taking these sites that are kind of in the middle of multiple master plan communities, or, there might be a Hayden project next to us or another developer. I mean, being able to coordinate with those other developers or home builders or who are also in the area. We do that on water lines. We do that with Avion and City of Bend water and all of those kinds of things. It would be really nice to be able to do that with stormwater, but it's just, we have to develop our own systems and these master builds. So it's less efficient that way.
That's a good challenge.
Yeah, you'd have to be like developing at the same time and planning at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm kind of looking at it, right? And that's one thing I forgot to mention in the beginning is also trying to keep some big picture perspective on this, right? And thinking about trying to walk before we run. And I think, actually, that's great. I think that's ultimately we want to have that flexibility in the long term to allow any dynamic of coordination privately to work as long as it meets those standards. But knowing I think that's kind of the end of the road, right? To have something. And so with this, I just want to keep that context of, maybe what we initially roll out with doesn't quite get us to that level, but it gets us a step in that direction. And we can report on this white paper in such saying hey, right now we feel comfortable as the first, trial of this to be this type of stuff, but we would like to then extend to this and further into the future. So
yeah, we could set some goals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's a great context to kind of leave, that I think kind of high objective there.
I guess with what Pablo was saying too.
Yeah, maybe if you could give me some information on what the overall goal is for stormwater management. I mean, what system is the City of Bend wanting to move towards?
So the goal of the regional facility is to really open flexibility in development, recognizing this density, push from a state and federal level. The status quo from, the way Bend's been working is keep everything on your side of the line, which is, still going to maintain an option. We're just trying to expand on those options. And like Lori pointed out, it's been kind of a work in progress for years. But again, or recognized as a need, but just trying to get, smaller bits into play that help expand into this, more options for development, basically.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's necessarily a cut and dry answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
okay, Brian,
but to Lori's point, my last one is the permitting does dictate in there. So like she said, that hierarchy, the permit dictates that we try to resemble natural drainage and then this and this and this.
Yeah, so you have to try first to handle it, but we do need to come up with some of these definitions, and Pablo was very helpful in that we can be a little open with our definition of what it means to say first try to handle it all on site. I think we can definitely be more flexible than we are now. And I think it's great. And you're right, Brian had his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, a few of the hurdles that we face, I think having a hierarchy that, like, if you can't do this, then do this. I think we want to be more flexible than that, recognizing that each site probably has some unique stuff. I think having things like you can do this or this if it's and having engineering be able to approve it. We've got projects right now, for example, where we have private stormwater systems that all drain to common dry wells. We've got projects where we have to have retention ponds, and we're taking the individual roof drainage from lots to a large pond. That's happening in a spot where we have 2-year time of travel limitations, right? From a well, and we can't do UICs anywhere, either on lot or in the streets. And so we have a combined system there. I think we want to have some flexibility with that. One of the other hurdles that we often face is that we can't have any private utilities in a public utility easement, or even a City of Bend private public sewer easement. So in a situation, for example, where maybe you have an alleyway or something like that, and you've got a private storm drain line that's trying to cross an easement, just a cross lateral pipe, those things become very challenging too. It's just the idea that we can't have any private storm utilities or private utilities period cross or otherwise go through these public utility easements can become a challenge sometimes.
Oh, that's a great one. Thank you, Brian. The difficulties we make for ourselves. Love it. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Well, I think.
Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I think we kind of generally got most of these. I think the last one I'll just kind of re-ask again. Any other like specific hurdles, like, oh God, I can't get my drainage report ever approved through development, or is it the reviews? Is it every time they come out to look at my swales, they're failing them and I can't get C of O, or like what's the biggest heartburn in the development community as far as drainage and interacting with jurisdictions having authority?
Sure, we're perfect in every way.
And something we can come back to if we think of something. But that's, I guess, the other part of this is, so I want to take all this feedback, and then my next stop is private development, and say, hey, here's what we're hearing from the development community. These are the things we want to do, because obviously we need to make sure they're on board. So with that, thanks for the feedback. Aubrey, if you can switch to the next slide. This one, I think, is a really big target for today. So like we mentioned, there's a lot of discussion about this and a lot of very similar language and a lot of like quickly convoluting topics. So when I try to sparse this out, here are the few things that made sense to me. So like, where is the facility located? And this particularly comes down to like private or public land, and kind of, Brian, to your point, easements and things like that. So number one, on site, and that I'm taking on site as on a private single lot. The next one would then be subdivision, where again, it's private property, but like we showed in that example, and like, I believe it's Luderman, it's, multiple lots that then drain to a facility that's on a private property. The next one is, like Lori kind of mentioned, is there something we want to consider where we need a baseline of like water quality event retained on site? So the 6 month to be on site and the rest can drain, or any combination of that. The other one then just directly to the public right of way. So let's, take all of our drainage and put it into a UIC or what have you. So on public property, a combination of that where you go subdivision and right of way for maybe a 25 and 100 year storm event, and then just one private and within the right of way. Can anyone think of any other combinations of where a facility can be on that? I know that's.
Oh, Bronwyn raised her hand. Let's talk about parks.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious where like large public landowners like parks or probably the school district or other public agencies come into play. Because I was just thinking about this yesterday, actually filling out like something for like a SIMP permit, and I had to check commercial, but we're not really commercial. We're not really residential.
That's a really good point. Yeah, so I guess in there, that kind of jumps to my fourth category of like the land use. And maybe that's something recognized as a category, like a park or something that would go that context, because that's an element that'll play into it as well. I would still see this though as like, really, I'm seeing like city-owned public property and not. So the park, right, I would still look as like a private entity, private property that we have to have any kind of like, in the city's eyes, like legal agreements in place for access and maintenance and all that.
Parks and schools do present, particularly parks, present opportunities for collaboration in terms of maybe not just the park's stormwater, but could other area stormwater be managed on a park site? And then, yeah, we'd have to figure out all the agreement stuff, like whose is it, who takes care of it, blah, blah, blah. But I can see this coming up in the central core area.
Well,
we're
I
planning
think
that.
Ronman, to your point though too, is like going through the development process, they don't identify the parks as a separate entity. You're commercial. So if we come and say, hey, we don't want industrial or commercial really to have these options, maybe we need though to specifically exclude, no, that doesn't mean the parks and the schools and these other ones. So I think that's, as far as development type, I'm definitely going to add that over. As far as the location goes, I'm going to keep it there as kind of like an asterisk. But I think
it's a good one. Thanks, Brian.
As far as the city, we kind of see that as still private, but very good for development. Yeah, any other combinations of facility location? If not, we'll jump to the next one. So who's draining now? So that's the single lot, kind of status quo today, multiple lots. So this is that subdivision concept that Luderman, looking at efficiencies and things like that, that you ideally put in at the infrastructure permit time. Then it's multi-lot and the public right-of-way. This is something where now we're getting pretty wild.
Dogs and cats living together.
Yeah, dogs and cats living together, and just putting it on here. This is something that seems pretty challenging at the time. So when we get into these strategies, we'll look at whether or not that's something we want to consider. Then the other one is the right-of-way. So that's pretty standard. The substandard when we get into the strategies is where that's managed. But as far as who or where the drainage is coming from, can anybody think of like any other additional sources or locations?
Let's hope not.
Hope not. Okay, so then moving on to facility owner. And if you guys are kind of getting it, we're basically going to go through and like patch each of these together. And so facility owner, it's either private or public. I can't really see a context where we'd want to share ownership in any case. So I think it'd be one or the other.
I agree, but I also want to say there maybe should be quotes around owner. I think it's kind of responsible for maintenance is the key issue here.
Yes.
Because you could have a facility that's, say, like that picture I showed, that's like built on a lot in a subdivision, but it could have an easement over it that's dedicated to the public agency and they maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I mean, that's kind of the ownership thing, but what this is really about is who's taking care of it, who's paying to take care of it.
Maintenance.
Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe we'll replace that ownership with maintenance, but you're exactly right. That's the point.
So I think there's a couple different ways to do this, of course, but I think if you're going to mix public water with private water, it ultimately becomes public water. And I would think that would be as part of the MS4 permit, right? You're managing stormwater. So once they're commingled, I think that at least the responsibility for the water itself could be the city's. Obviously, if it's a private tract in a subdivision or something, there could be a landscape agreement. You enter into contracts with the HOA or the developer, right, to maintain the landscaping and those things. So there's some sort of maintenance agreement that gets entered into. That would be one way to do it versus obviously trying to deed the land of the city, which I've seen before also, right?
Yeah, what I've more frequently seen, Brian, is it's actually an easement.
Yeah, easement to the
That's
city.
granted.
And the HOA
Yeah.
or city owns the land. That's what I'm also more frequently associated with. So
Yeah, and so it's a big decision to make. And I'll say as an example, I mean, there's most of the larger agencies managing stormwater. So again, we're thinking about like Willamette Valley type stuff. Most of them have decided that ultimately to ensure the proper maintenance of these facilities, that the public agency should take care of them. But that's a big fiscal decision because then you have to then collect more money so you can take care of those facilities. It becomes a rate question. And then do you try to collect extra money just from each of those developments spread all over the place? Or do you just say, no, we're just going to charge everybody in the city $1 more a month. And this is just all for the public good. And that's easier to collect. Typically, they go with that answer. But I don't know here with the long history of private management of stormwater. We do get a lot of phone calls from the public, from our ratepayers, who are saying, I manage all my stormwater on site. Why do I have to pay my monthly stormwater bill? And I have to do a lot of it explaining that, well, one of the reasons it's only like $7 a month here versus if you were on the west side, you'd be paying like $20 a month, is because that's money is for the maintenance of the public stormwater system. So that we all use. We all drive on those roads and ride our bikes on those roads, and we want to see that stormwater managed. So we're paying for that. We're assuming everybody's handling the rest of it themselves. That's their personal responsibility. But all that to say that becomes part of this discussion of, do we take on as a public agency the maintenance of more stormwater management or not? And I think that's going to be, I mean, that's what's really one of the crucial things to this discussion is, I think I'm hearing everybody say, yes, flexibility, yes, let's look for efficiency. I don't think I've heard anything different than that. And so then it will come down to who has responsibility here. Then
Right.
It will be something for us to discuss. We have to figure it out today, but just for people to acknowledge that's a big part of this discussion.
Yeah, and also acknowledging the size of our stormwater department right now is still in it's not of an infancy, but it's
our level of service is pretty low.
Yeah.
If you look at, so, I mean, that's kind of it's another thing about the cost of the service, but just to know when I started over here a couple of years ago and we were preparing for the stormwater master plan, I'm like, hey, can we get TV records for our stormwater pipes? Where they send the little TV cameras down the pipes. And it's like, yeah, we don't have that for the stormwater system. I'm like, can you TV those so that we can have that, condition information? And so we started doing that on the bigger pipes, like, in Galveston and stuff like that. Well, it turns out like about half of it, we can't get the TV equipment through. So our level of service in terms of our system and what is something we will be talking about as well as part of the master plan. Like, oh, maybe we should have like every 5 to 10 years, we're running a camera through a pipe. Every X number of years, we're probably dealing with roots and things like that. That all goes to, so our ability to maintain has to be part of this. And you're absolutely right. That goes to the resources we have within the department.
But that kind of going back to this, wanting this to be very developer driven of a voice. So that I can come to council and say, look, like this is what the community wants. Let's continue to build a program that helps support that so that, Sam and Billy have more support, or whoever's Travis going around to maintain all these things.
Yeah. And this doesn't, I just want to say, yes, a development point of view, but the purpose of this committee is to represent a whole bunch of views. And so I think this group, I mean, it's interesting because I am hearing from others as well, like, yeah, we also kind of support this idea of being more flexible and allowing kind of a little bit more from the on-site to the regional. And I think that would be important for council to hear as well, is whether there's kind of broad-based support.
So I know
Great.
Kristen's had her hand up for a little bit, and then also just
Oh, I'm
mention
sorry.
Austin, we've got like a half hour left too. So just
Thank you.
Okay, Kristen.
go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, I have more of a question than a comment. I'm curious, the city inspections of the stormwater systems happen like only immediately after they're built, correct?
Well, it depends on the systems. I mean, when I was talking about the worst part of our level of service is about some of the pipes themselves, we actually do like inspect and clean catch basins every year. So it depends which component of the system. We also inspect and do maintenance on like public, like swales and things like that as well on an annual.
I guess, I'm sorry, my question was more in regards to private development.
Yeah.
Oh, so private development, we're just building a program, and that is something required by the DEQ permit. So when a developer builds a private facility, they sign an agreement that gets attached to the deed of the property. And that agreement says, hey, you have this kind of facility, you have to maintain it. They're supposed to send annual reports to the city. That usually doesn't happen. Of like, yes, we maintained it, and here's what we found, and here's what we did. So we're right now in the process of building that program. We just sent out notices to all properties that we know that have private facilities and said, hey, do you know you have a facility and that you're supposed to be sending a report annually? And we're kind of seeing what response we get. And we're building a process. So that agreement they signed does give us permission to access private property to look at those facilities. And we're going to be building within the resource capacity we have to start going out and looking at a certain percentage of those facilities and then having it be very education focused. Like, hey, did you know you have this facility and these are the things you're supposed to be doing, and trying to convince people to do the right thing. We're going to be creating a much easier online system where people could like answer a couple of questions annually. That's their annual report. So I would say we're in kind of the early stages of understanding the condition of what's out there on private property.
Okay, yeah, because I think the first thing that was coming to mind, and just in terms of wanting to ensure that people are maintaining their facilities, would just be like, where's the room for like a little bit more enforcement, or maybe like every 10 years or something, there's an inspection, or having the reports due, just so that, it's not the either or of like either privately owned and potentially not maintained, or we have to take it over as a public entity in order to ensure that it's maintained. I think kind of finding that middle ground of just like keeping tabs.
I think that's a great point, Kristen, is that we should have as part of this the discussion that the presumption of construction and maintenance on private property, that somehow that probably should be checked on in some manner.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay, well, jumping back, do you have something else to add?
I was just curious who is like if you had a private facility, who would you call to come check that to?
So you'd call the Water Services Department.
Okay.
Yeah, Billy in the Water Services Department.
Cool. I'll write that down.
Yeah.
Billy
Johnson in the Water Services
When you do like
Department.
a UIC or something that trips the threshold, then they're like, you're gonna do this maintenance agreement with us, we're gonna record it against the property, and you're legally gonna do this. Everything's gonna be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller things, you just like get an early inspection, and then it just kind of sits the status quo. So that's kind of that in between, like Kirsten's pointing out, is like, yeah, what's the level of like oversight and performance testing from the initial exception for those like smaller, one-off.
Yeah, because we do maintenance services for a lot of HOA and bigger properties.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they had something like this and asked us to look into it, we'd probably call Billy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because they would run, then there's a specific agreement that got recorded and notarized and put against a property that says this is what you got to do.
Okay.
Most people are completely unaware of that. Okay, so
They probably are unaware of it.
yeah, jumping back in here, I think we just kind of have one more category wanted to run through the group. So this is basically like the development types, pretty typical out of the development code. The one I got down, thanks Broadwin, is a public agency. I think that's another good one. So maybe the development type might change a little bit there as far as what we call it, but I think trying to identify like what's happening on that property. You know, what's the level of contamination risk that we have? So with that, is there any other category or something? So the idea here is you kind of mix and match every combination of these things and say, yeah, that seems like a good idea, or no, that doesn't seem like a good idea. And with that, I've kind of broke that into 3 basic strategies that we'll take a look at. But before we jump into that, is there anything else that we should consider? Like, is there a 5th element that we should be looking at as far as like the combination of context, or does this seem like a pretty conclusive list? Yeah, Kristen?
Just thinking of development type in the park districts, conflict there of having to mark commercial, there could be like an institutional or like special district development type as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what's not like I don't have Deschutes River Woods or any of these special plan districts put in here. I think we kind of take those at whatever the basic development is, right? You have these special districts, but maybe they're typically residential or a mixed use or something, and those will all be case specific. But
I think it's more the institutional land use category that we might want to pull out a little.
Pull out of that, yeah.
Schools, yeah, like parks, schools, anything that's not, it's like a governmental entity.
Yeah, other agency, like, I don't know, could be the county and ODOT too, right?
Yeah, part of me, I'm trying to do more focus on like
works facilities. Yeah.
But like just I don't want to be so much that like a public agency owns it. I want this to be a reflection of the contamination risk. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like, does a school and a business really have a difference in their pollution generation?
Well, it's also the opportunities they present too, though. Because
Mm-hmm.
what those are is the opportunity of these larger parcels with a larger percentage of open space.
Gotcha.
So I think that to me, that's what I'm thinking about with like schools and parks and perhaps some other examples as well, as it's kind of those bigger spaces.
Yeah. So that actually gives me some more to chew on, kind of jumping back to location of facility. Maybe it goes into that category, but.
Yeah, well, this is good though. This is good. This is good food for thought.
This is
for
great.
All these different things.
Any other kind of general comments as far as the categories and descriptions before we start jumping into a few of the strategies?
You're probably gonna have to just like pick 1 or 2.
Yeah, it'll be quick. Here we go.
Okay, here we go.
Can we jump to the next slide there, please, Aubrey? So I won't spend too much on this one. This is the status quo. So here's just an example of like how we're putting it together. So it's all these are located on site. That's normal right now. It's all draining single lots because we're not crossing over. It's all private, and it's just different development types. So I don't think there's really a whole lot to add. I think a lot of the concerns and challenges we went over. So strategy 2, this is really, Aubrey, if you could switch, thank you. Now this is really like that subdivision type. And I think this is really like, I see the biggest opportunity for like early implementation. And I think when we go to those efficiencies and stuff on a development level, this is really where I see it. So basically, aside from the first one, everything else is subdivision. That first category is for that idea of, do we want to set a minimum threshold of like water quality event or a certain event on site before allowing it to go to a subdivision facility? Is there any benefit or need to that? Curious kind of what the group thinks.
First, a question, how do you define a water quality event?
Okay, so thank you.
That's in the permit too.
That's fantastic. So our design criteria identify the water quality event as the 6-month storm event. So that is 1.5 inches within 24 hours. So the idea there is that that first 1.5 inches
That's
of
not
runoff.
1.5 inches. The 6 month, isn't it more like a 1/2 inch?
Let's bet lunch on this.
Okay, okay.
So,
That's a lot.
yeah, probably.
Anyways, it's a smaller storm that you might see supposedly like a couple times a year, right?
Right, 1/2 inch in this area is that's pretty good, yeah.
The idea
I know,
is
I
though,
might
it's
beat you here,
that
Austin.
first runoff that you get, that's all those dry oils and things that we don't want to like send to that next facility.
That makes
So,
sense.
so like this is coming into play with South Aubrey View drainage, where we're getting the 6-month mandated into that UIC facility, but then we're having an overflow to a trunk line that then conveys that volume. So there's 2 different things we're looking at: water quality, conveyance of flood prevention, or however you want to call it. So yeah, any kind of thoughts, like even being redundant here, is this something of interest here? Is there specifically any of these? Like, look at the bottom 2. This is looking at, combining that public right-of-way water into this facility. Again, that would lead kind of like Brian pointed out to, public ownership of the maintenance. So that
Unless there's an agreement, which he also talked about.
Unless there's an agreement.
Yeah. So maybe again, instead of facility owner, it's also the key thing is who's taking care of it.
That's what that category means now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maintenance. So I think the first one, is there interest to that? It seems like, the closest to what we currently have, in a few handful of examples that, of a subdivision facility.
That's like that Luderman example. And that's what Pablo said could be considered on site. So this was very helpful in this conversation. We didn't have that discussion before we put these slides
So
together.
playing with the language.
Yeah.
So Pablo and the DEQ on site, recognizing that meets our permitting guidance to say on site. So that's, again, representing the natural drainage pattern, which is great to hear that this subdivision approach would meet that in the eyes of the
Right, so we can go check on the regulatory box.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm interested in opinions about whether it should just be, we don't really care if, let's talk about subdivision, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't really care if everything that drains off of whatever in that subdivision goes to like some subdivision level facility. Or to maybe Kristen's point, should there be something where we're trying to keep a little bit on site, whether that be keeping a certain amount of stormwater on site or just keeping a certain percentage of landscape, which then goes to all kinds of talks with the planners about that. But just folks' thoughts about that idea, whether we should be thinking about lot by lot or just saying, you know what, as long as it's handled at the subdivision level, from a water quality and a quantity standpoint, we are good to go.
I mean, my thoughts are, I like the idea to manage it on a subdivision level, because I think it's much more efficient, probably more effective. I think what's also important to note is that we're really talking about drainage coming off of these lots. All we're really talking about that's being allowed right now is roof drainage, which is pretty clean, right? We're not currently draining anything from backyards or surface area drains, right? That could get fertilizers and other types of things. So the water that lands, outside of the roof is still theoretically required to be retained on the project site. So yeah, we do need obviously some pervious areas for, things like that to land. But if you have, for example, patios and other types of hardscaping out in your yard, that water is not currently allowed to go to the public stormwater system or public right of way.
Right, and that's where we'd be trying to expand that to incorporate that.
Okay.
So I think, So that's great. It sounds like this is generally, pretty supported. The last kind of element of this strategy I want to get on is, what about development types? Like, are you guys finding this across all types of development, commercial, residential, industrial, or is this like more like housing, like more of a residential issue? So should we focus it to that? Again, this goes to this like contamination risk, and do we need to, and again, back to the walk before we run, because I want this to roll out like successfully.
Oh, maybe apply to residential first, for instance.
That's what I'm thinking. Before we try to like open this up to commercial and industrial, like,
Let's go to the weird question about multi-use.
Well, I would think it'd be residential and multi-use, because I think multi-use has a big one. But maybe commercial's there too. I mean, like, again, looking at the central core area as like a pretty big example, that's where we're expecting like zero lot line, large, lot coverages with like, minimal space for drainage.
We're talking about a lot more stormwater discharge, a lot less place to put it, more potential in my mind for various types of pollutants than just a single family residential subdivision.
Right. Yeah. So,
not to hog the conversation, my experience, Austin, is that on commercial stuff, we usually have enough area on site to manage stormwater, typically under parking and drive aisles. The exception to that would be when you start getting small commercial lots. It's really these smaller lots, right? That are like, whether it be residential or commercial, that you really get constrained because you just don't have anywhere to put it. So it's
I
almost
kind of think
with a
that's
lot
its own
size
category.
right?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to try to put a definition on, right? Is what's the small stuff that, because then even what do we do with it? If it's not part of a larger subdivision development and you've got it's like a little infill, right? And it's struggling with what the heck to do with their stormwater.
well, yeah, that's a great segue, Lori, into strategy 3.
Ooh.
So if you could switch the last slide, I know we're running out of time here. So basically we're looking at now, instead of like a subdivision type facility, this facility is going in the right of way. So Brian, like this kind of seems like that would be that context, right? A small commercial development, you don't have like, you're probably not doing like 6 small commercial developments all next to each other that you'd have like kind of that private partnership. Now you're looking to partner with the city in the right of way because you don't have that space on your site. You want to look at either, finding out how to then put that facility in the public right of way that possibly only serves a single or multiple private lot, or a combination of that and the public right of way. So there could be a context where, you have a commercial development. Hey, you got to build a bit of a road. You now have right of way stormwater to manage, and you have your commercial private stormwater to manage. If all that fits under maybe 25,000 gallons, if that's still a comfortable threshold for facilities, and that's kind of that next detail I kind of want to come back to.
So we might have to require a frontage improvement.
Well, that
allow them to do that.
Well, those are normally come with these developments. So if you come in and say, I want to build this commercial development, most likely you're going to probably do some right-of-way frontage improvement that includes impervious, which includes the
We'd have to kind of explore that though and see like let's say it's a couple of residential infill lots. We might not trigger a frontage improvement. It kind of depends probably if there's sidewalk already. So there might be some scenarios to look at, but I think this is great that this leads to then the discussion about, are there certain size of things, small stuff that we could say, okay, you can put it all in the right of way.
So I think kind of walking away, I know there's like a lot of different kind of categories to look at, but is there anything glaring here between these 3 strategies that?
Well, let me ask Aubrey a question. Hey, Aubrey, you had put together a mural board for this, and I think you're probably typing notes while we go along. Is that something that do you think we should send out to folks so they could add more notes to it? Is that a good tool?
We absolutely can. Easy enough. And if if folks want to add notes, they can.
Could you show it just so people can see? I think everybody here's used the mural tool before.
So mural is a digital whiteboard. Our team our group has used this in the past. I'm sorry, I'm just bringing it up. So I will email a link, and you click that link. You can say, I want to join as a guest, and then it's an online space. And I included, so it's, big whiteboard, and then, sorry, I'm going to get rid of the little. All right, so there's an outline over at the side, and, strategy 1, here's the questions we were asking today. Here's the little table kind of re-represented. There's lots of white space here, so you can just double click and add a note that says, hey, I think, here's a challenge or whatever, and plop it onto the board. And we can make this available so folks can see feedback coming from others, and can kind of keep noodling on these 3 strategies or any gaps or opportunities to improve here as we head out of today's meeting, which was a lot of things to chew on. So I'll send a link to this following today's conversation.
So if folks are interested, if you have more thoughts, I mean, there's a lot we talked about here. And if you have more thoughts, I mean, feel free to just send an email too. But if you want to, you can use that link that Aubrey will send, and you can it's like putting little sticky notes on the board, and you can add comments, questions, issues onto that. And then we'll continue collecting that, because we're going to provide all of this to Trista at OTAC to use to help kind of now trying to lay out what's the outline of this white paper, and kind of some different, maybe a couple different options or something like that. And we need to talk to other groups. We need to talk, you guys are the first ones we're really talking to in this depth about, and so we need to go internally across departments as well.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping to just give a quick kind of what to expect next for a formal UPAC. So like Lori said, I didn't want to come to you guys at the end and say, here's what we think. What do you think? Because again, I think a development community driven content. So
community driven.
So next up is, it seems like I think we have pretty good notes and background and, support for this, is to now engage with private development again, say, hey, here's what we're seeing. We've already met with them once, where we want to go, and start kind of working through more of these specifics, getting into more of the details now of like, okay, what is the process to give permit review that that gut feeling that you have exhausted all of your on-site options to move through that hierarchy, and then also meeting with them, who would you feel comfortable draining? Maybe they don't industrial or commercial or, smaller groups, or, just figuring out how to roll out. So please, I think with our agendas like pretty full and other stormwater topics that we're slated for, we won't really have time to touch on this too much. In the near future, please feel free to directly reach out to me if you have any input or questions, or want to email about this stuff, or it could even do like a follow-up kind of sidebar meeting or anything.
That actually goes to, I don't know if you want to bring the slides back up again.
Yes. So we do have a question about our April meeting, and
so next
Austin
month,
teed this up. Yep.
So next month, OTAC's going to come to talk about prioritization of big capital projects. So we'll get to hear about the capital projects, how they kind of, we all put together our values and our criteria, and like get our gut check on that. And then March and April, we need to talk to you about water conservation topics. But and then May, we're planning to come back and do like a draft of the master plan to talk to everybody. It would be nice sometime in maybe April to talk about like, hey, after we've talked to everybody about this drainage and density topic, this is kind of where we think we're ending up. What do you think? To do that, we have a couple of choices. One is we could just like send it out to everybody, and you could just read it and send us comments. That's a choice. Another choice is we could make the April meeting longer, or we could add a meeting in April just for people who want to come and just talk about this topic. So I would love to hear from folks about what's your appetite to come back and talk, I think mostly about this topic.
I think this is probably the biggest, like,
Yeah.
and again,
And I apologize, we just don't have time in the agendas. We have so many things to talk to you guys about.
But I could even pull in private development, like depending on what feedback we get from them. Like maybe we get more resistance than we're anticipating, or
The city's private development.
City's private development. Maybe there's like a couple key points that, maybe we want to discuss in more of a.
Yeah, so I don't know, Aubrey, how do we get input on this?
I would say, anybody just raise their hands. Would you like to keep being involved in providing feedback on this topic? Just generally? Seeing some hands up. Okay, so then any first blush ideas of longer meeting sounds good, or subcommittee would maybe be better, and then we could take offline with what the timing and who all would want to be involved in a second April meeting. Anybody want to chime in on that front? It could be, the whole group is invited to the 11 to 12:30, the start of April 2nd meeting for water conservation, and just those who are keen on this topic could hang around for the second half. Just, recognizing folks' schedules.
Maybe I can do a 2-minute update at March and just say, here's where we're at. Do you want to meet next month? I don't know.
We could, but I'm interested in just right now, anybody thinking, or feel free to
we'll do this
put
as
in
part
the
of our
chat.
follow-up too, or give it some thought.
Okay, so maybe folks think about that. If you have an opinion, please let us know soon about whether you're willing to sit longer in the April meeting, whether you'd have interest, but you'd rather it be, boy, that's too long, I'd rather find an extra hour some other time, or whether you just like, hey, just send me something to read and I promise I'll send you comments. So thank you for that.
Great. All right. Our materials are always posted to the webpage. That is changing. It's updated to say WAG now. So we'll get a new little acronym there if you're looking for past meeting materials. And then stormwater is going to be our focus in February again. So look for agenda and comments on that. We'll follow up today, as mentioned, with a link to that mural space, so you could do the direct outreach, and then a reminder on, just kind of your interest and preference for an April conversation to provide more input on the drainage and density topic for stormwater. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, for kicking things off in 2025, and for another bite at the apple of the drainage and density topic, which is a complex one and has a lot to it. So probably coming back again here a few times, and more stormwater.
I do see, Aubrey, I guess if they want to hang out, I see Brian and Shane both have their hands up.
I'd asked folks to raise a hand for interest in the topic.
I'm interested in the topic. Got it. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much.